Take 3 Gen Xers, give them a topic about music, movies, pop culture, or whatever, and how it relates to them growing up in the 70s and 80s as part of Generation X. Add one person from another generation to see if there's any common ground, and you've got Solve for Gen X, starting now.
I would like you to somehow reference Alice in Wonderland in your opening.
Okay.
That'd be good. That commercial that goes like, and I told 2 friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. I don't know why.
Actually, you want a back support pillow?
I would like one, yeah. Thank you.
You got a little back problem?
No, it's just our table isn't that close to the couch. You know what I mean?
It's like an awkward distance, sort of.
Yeah.
In our studio.
Yeah.
In our recording studio.
I'm a little, I'm having like some vocal problems because of freaking allergies. And so I'm drinking this hot tea and I'm already like sweating.
Also, I would like you to include in your intro some vocal fry.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's real bad.
Maybe the whole episode would be great.
Ew.
Just live there for the whole episode.
He knows I hate it.
We should all do a vocal fry episode.
Let's just
Cool. So what do I start or we just intro? What do we do? Hello, everybody, and welcome to Solve for Gen X, the podcast where we go back and look at the way we grew up, the things that shaped us, made us who we are, and then compare the differences between us and other generations. Today's episode is called Looking Glass, looking back at who we thought our grown-up selves would be. It's actually a different title, but that was pretty close. So, you know, looking through the looking glass, that's that like Alice in Wonderland kind of reference, where, you know, she goes through the looking glass into Wonderland. She sees, you know, sort of this whole other world that's like been there the whole time, all these things that she tries. And so our goal today was to do just that. Go back to when we were kids or even in high school through our years, what we thought our grown-up lives were going to look like, and then compare how they actually turned out. What was the difference, you know, the plus or minus? And if this sounds interesting to you and you enjoy the episode, maybe you could tell a friend, and then they could tell a friend, and so on, and so on. And that's how we launch our show.
And so on.
Solve for Jenna.
Solve for Gen X.
It was the age of parachute pants.
Skinny ties, neon headbands.
We rode our bicycles helmet free.
A nicotine from a vending machine.
Decades, pastimes, memories, and masters song. Solve for Gen X. Solve for Gen X. Solve for Gen X. Solve for Gen X.
That was pretty good.
Really well done. Were you drumming and playing the bass at the same time?
Always.
That's excellent. That's pretty good.
I'm sure I've done that before on this podcast.
I mean, this is he's doing it in a very cramped situation. A lot of times
I'm trying to make sure it's all on camera, but I do like to play the bass way up
I
there.
think it needs to be way up here. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's very like, I'm like, is that a bass or is that just your nip? Like, what's happening there?
What am I doing with this hand? You know what I'm doing with this hand. Guess what I'm doing with this hand?
I don't know. Hey, I'm Ashley Ward, Gen X 1972.
I'm Nate Starkey, Gen X 1971.
And I'm Matt Vogel, Gen X 1970. Almost.
Wow, this time we did it in reverse order.
I like it.
It's beautiful. Yeah, so when I was thinking about this, it was a little bit sad because I realized I don't really think I am a person of great imagination in terms of potential for myself. Because I was thinking back and I was like, oh, what did I want to be when I was a kid? And I was like, I remember there was a period of time when like almost any new thing I would hear about, I'd be like, oh, that's what I want to be. Like I remember at one point I was like, I want to be a preacher. I want to be I remember this one very distinctly because it was odd. I want to be a boxer. And I think it was because
I'm sorry. Wait, where did that come from?
Honestly, I think it was things that like were in the news, like, or that were being like lauded as great in some kind of way. So like probably people were talking about Muhammad Ali or talking about, you know, some Sugar Ray Leonard or somebody was like in the news in a big way. And it was like, wow, what an impressive, it was like boxing is always around, like it's always happening. But at the same time, there are blips in time when boxing becomes a thing that everyone knows about and talks about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Mike Tyson biting Evander Holyfield's ear. You might have not thought of boxing for many years. Suddenly it's in the zeitgeist. We're all talking about it constantly. I think it was like my people pleasing need, and then hearing something being talked about in a lauded way, I'd be like, oh, that is good. That is good. But then ultimately, I really, as a kid, I think I assumed I would be a teacher. I assumed I would live in my town. I thought I would live next door to my best friend. And like literally, and then I was thinking about it too. I was like, well, where had I been by age 10? I had been to a couple places in Georgia, some places in Alabama, and one place in Florida.
So that you'd be a teacher thing, because I find this topic interesting. Like speaking from generationally speaking, right? Because I know a lot of like my stepmother, for example, who is was a teacher, but is so super talented that she could have been any number of things,
right?
That I wonder if she grew up thinking, oh, that. So imagination wise, you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's all that's offered to me as a woman is to grow up and be a teacher or receptionist or a secretary. So do you think you wanting to be a teacher is a holdover from that a little bit? Or
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also think it could be, though, that teachers were like that was one of the adults, the main adults that we dealt with every day.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was an example every minute of the day of a job that was being done right.
And that was like,
and if you're an intellectually curious person, then teacher is a person who knows stuff.
Right.
That's a great
and I
thing
was, I think I've mentioned before that I started my own library for my neighborhood. No one ever checked any books out, but I did put the little cards in the back, and I made the little thing to hold the.
So I guess my question was, how much of it to you was like teacher does seem like a cool thing to be, or an interesting thing to be, or something that I've been introduced to that I admire, or how much of it was that? How much was it like, well, I have limited options, and teacher's one of those.
I don't think it was even that deep as I have limited options, but I think that feeling, that holdover feeling, because my mother became a teacher, and like, God bless her, literally worst person on earth to teach anyone anything.
So I think she's another good example of someone who's like, why would you think you want to be a teacher? It's like, oh, well, if in your lifetime that's what women do, then yeah.
You could be a teacher or a nurse. And she knew she wouldn't be a nurse because she didn't like blood and stuff like that. Right. And she was the first person in her family to go to college. So she was like, okay, I got to figure something out to be. I guess it's a teacher, because those are kind of the choices, you know?
She was a teacher when you were growing up, or after, or later?
When I was a little girl, before I was born, she taught. And then when I was born, and I think she maybe took a couple of years off, like when I was born, and then my sister was born like 21 months after me or something. So she might have gone back for a little bit, but she had like a chunk of time she was off. And then when I was a little girl, she taught like adult education, like continuing education at like a community college for people, adult literacy, basically. Again, worst case scenario person to teach this, because I'm sure she was just the whole time like, why didn't y'all just learn to read when you were children? Like, that's kind of how she is, and just like, how are y'all not getting this?
I guess you'll just never be very smart.
Like, very like, she has no patience. She has no like.
You're probably a person who just will grow up and not really do much with your life.
She's just not she's not very intellectually curious, and she's extremely impatient and like time, like just like, why is this taking so long? Let's just keep it moving. Like, you got this, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we're done. We got it. Like very like that.
But do you think that's was she always like that? Or maybe that was because, you see, my kids have had teachers that are like, they can't stand them. And I'd say, like, well, I wonder if it was always that way for them. Or was there a time where they were like, young and they were they were just idealistic, and they came into the job thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to teach these kids. And then just like year after year after year. No, not for you. No, not for your mom.
She was never that.
No, he was.
That is like
He's
so
not well suited for being.
That
a
is
teacher.
not in her DNA to be like, I'm going to change the world. She's like one of the most pragmatic people I've ever encountered in my existence, in terms of just like, and like she would say things that you could read as mean, but a lot of times it was really just her being like, well, let's just deal with the practicalities in front of it. Like it really, and it's like, she's very much about the cold heart. She's like, oh, we're not going to save anybody. I'm going in there and I'm doing this because they have to be here and I have to be here. Like that's really how she probably, I didn't know her when she first started teaching because I wasn't born. I can only imagine that's how she was. But yeah, so I think like some of it was that holdover thing. Some of it was, I mean, my elementary school had 3 male teachers in the entire, like K through 5th grade. One was the band teacher, one was a 5th grade teacher, and one was a 4th grade teacher. And then our principal was a man. So, I mean, like almost every woman I encountered in my day-to-day existence was a teacher. My Sunday school teachers were all women. My, like just those were the people, that you.
Yeah. Those dude teachers were probably like scoring with all the lady teachers.
Scoring.
Yeah.
Scoring.
I thought you said scorned.
Scorned.
Maybe a little both.
I don't think so, but I don't know. But yeah, so I think like that just seemed like, and that was a thing I liked to play a lot. My sister and I would play school, like we had elaborate, I've talked about it, I think before, school playing, where my dad at one point heard us and was just like, are your teachers like this? Cause like he would like scream at people, like be like really awful. Yeah. And interestingly, so my mom was a teacher, but then as a side job, she sang in a cover band from when I was in maybe
Everyday People.
That was the name of the band. From when I was maybe in kindergarten or 1st grade through maybe 2nd or 3rd, not that long, a couple of years. But
she was the singer, the lead singer.
She was the lead singer, and the lead female singer. There was a male singer too, and she also played the Moog, the keyboard.
So Ashley, for you, this is interesting because maybe in a different time or a different place or a different environment of some kind, your mom would have been like, yeah, it's realistic for me to want to be in a band for a career, right? Because she loved it so much. So my question for you is, when did you first have thoughts like, I want to sing for professionally or be an actor professionally or do something artsy?
So that I think happened around, I think it really cemented for me in 10th grade, because the summer after 10th grade, we had I went to this thing called Governor's Honors Program. So they would have for 6 weeks, you would go to Valdosta State College down in South Georgia. You would live in the dorms and you would go to your classes, whatever your major was, and you'd have a minor too. And it was a thing where it was like a teacher had to nominate you, and there were math people, English people, drama people, voice people, musical instrument, all the things. And you would get nominated. There'd be like a regional audition, then the state audition, and then you either got picked or you didn't. And so the first year you're eligible is in 10th grade. So I got to go in 10th grade, and my teacher was a man named Bill Johns. I'm not scared to use real names. And the other teacher was a woman named Spring Mason. And I loved Bill Johns so much. And I think he was probably the first professional actor I ever met. And he, he taught this in the summer, but I just remember being like, oh, like that's a job.
That is cool.
That people have as their job.
Yeah.
And so I think it was kind of eye-opening for me and I think from that point on, I was like, I think that's what I want to do.
He was an actor. And what was he acting in? Like regional theater?
I think he was just doing a lot of theater. I don't really remember the specifics. I just remember, and now knowing what my life is, I understand he was probably an actor a very small amount of time, and he was teaching and doing other little things to make money a lot of the time, because that's the life of most actors. It's very rare that your whole livelihood comes just from acting. That's it happens. That's not impossible. But I know plenty of people where, it's a thing that, like, I think to just demystify it, I think a lot of people are like, wow, that person's on a TV show. I guess they're set for life. And no, like I've known people who've done more than one season of a TV show and then like a year later are working in a bar or temping somewhere or, like doing different things. There's also people who are like theater actors who work all the time, and theater really pays just garbage money.
Not a lot of money. Yeah.
And so then they have to have another job, they have other jobs between. And so usually that's why they gravitate towards restaurant work, because it's easy to kind of come and go from.
I feel like I've heard your mom talk about like you'd be such a good lawyer and stuff like that. And I agree with her, actually. Also, a doctor. You'd be a good doctor.
I would not be a good doctor.
Oh, right.
I don't like
You'd be
blood.
a good medical researcher or something. Maybe not with the actual, someone's life is in your hands kind of thing.
I definitely I remember there were times that a lawyer was a thing because my grandfather was a lawyer.
Did you ever want to be a lawyer?
I did. I definitely was had an interest in it. And I think like if you have any thought in your head that you want to be an attorney, go work in a law firm and then see how you feel.
Yeah, because you did that.
I did.
Not because you wanted to be an attorney as much as just like that seemed like a good paying job to have.
The first law firm job I had was a friend of my stepdad's was a partner in a law firm in New York and was like, hey, would you ever want to hire? And she was like, actually, we need a paralegal right now. And have her come in. We'll talk with her. And I got hired there. That was like at a patent and trademark firm. And, it was fine. It's like, but the thing that was funny to me was like literally every lawyer there would be like, don't become a lawyer. It's awful. It's the worst.
Well, it's so funny because
I hate my life.
It's such an occupation that at least, maybe I'm wrong, but like a lawyer and doctor always seem like that's a top profession, right? Having said that, there is so much hatred for lawyers from the same people who probably wish their kids had been lawyers. That's right. I don't understand that.
Well, my mom, her whole thing was always
aspirational thing, maybe that it's like it seems like it's this high.
You make a lot of money. That was why my mother liked it.
Like you should be a lawyer. Lawyers are the worst.
She always thought that because she was like, you're so smart. Like you should do something. Like you should put your brain to use and like. You're so good at arguing, because I did argue a lot at home. And I was like, yeah, that's like.
What happened to that?
How dare you? And then you find out that like, that's like, again, a very small percentage of attorneys are spending their time in courtrooms arguing cases. Right. I did decide to become an actor. And I did. That is what happened. And yeah, it's a bumpy, rocky, difficult road.
But also you are a teacher.
I am a teacher.
What drew you to that over
to improv?
Yeah, like when did that come into your life and then you were like, oh, I think I'm good at this?
Basically, I think it was like when I first moved to New York and I was going to like these open call auditions, which a lot of them would be type out auditions where you would go in, you'd have a number, you'd stand in a room with like 15 people, you'd hold up your number and they'd say 4, 11, 16, stay. Everybody else, thank you very much. You had waited for 3.5 hours and that was your audition. So I did that for Rent like 4 times, I think, and was just like, this is crazy. And then I got hired at Disney. Disney would have these Walt Disney World in Orlando would have these general auditions like once a year. And they would basically be hiring across the board anything they did at the parks above the character level. Mm-hmm. And I was in my mind auditioning to be in like the Beauty and the Beast, the live Beauty and the Beast show, or one of their musicals. And it was a great way to get your equity card. And so that was what you had to go in, sing 2 16-bar songs and do 2 contrasting monologues, I think, or something, or do like a comedic monologue. And I got called back for an improv show. And I was like, what? I'm so confused. And so then we had to do improv in the audition and in the callback.
Before that?
I had taken like a level 1 class at IO the summer of 96 when I lived in Chicago. And I hated it. I did not like my teacher. I was like, oh, this isn't for me.
Are you going to name drop your teacher?
Yeah, Sharna Halpern.
Yeah, I thought so.
And who ran IO. Anyway, I really didn't like it. I didn't, and I honestly, I do think it was her as a teacher, because most people come out of like level 1 improv and they're like, this is the best. And I was like, I don't like it, and I'm not good at it.
Well, we talked about teaching as a profession. I think so many teachers are so influential in people's development.
Yeah.
For that very reason. Like, one good or bad teacher early on in a developmental phase, whatever it is, can change your entire course.
Yeah, it's true.
Crazy.
But right. Yeah, so I think like then getting that job at Disney, where it was like, they liked me so much in the audition. They had 2 shows. They were like, 2 show directors wanted me in their improv show. And they're like, you have to choose which one you want to be in. And one of them was going to be like an inaugural show at Animal Kingdom, because Animal Kingdom was about to open. And we were going to get to go to like Toronto or somewhere in Canada to study dinosaurs, because it was going to be like a dinosaur oriented show. And then the other one was like, you got to create your character from the ground up. And there was like this rehearsal process, and it was going to be like improvising on the streets of MGM Hollywood, which was the name of the Hollywood MGM Studios, whatever the heck it was called. Yeah. And I was really torn, because I really wanted to go. I'd never been to Canada. I was like, archaeologist. I'd always been interested in that because of Indiana Jones. And
you wanted to be an archaeologist at one point.
Yeah, I did, because we did in 5th grade in my gifted and talented class. We did a whole section on archaeology, to where like it was the coolest class. We came in one day, and in the back of the school where we went to for this class, they had buried all these things, and like that's cool. We had to do the thing where we measured out the like sections, and then we like dusted and dug, and then like cataloged, really cool. And it was
How
very,
can that
very
not
cool.
Make you want to be an archaeologist? It's
right.
So cool.
And also, like, you learn, like, it's the opposite of being a lawyer. If you want to be an archaeologist, it is just exactly like Indiana Jones.
It wasn't. But then, I ended up doing the one at MGM Hollywood, because I was just like, that just feels like a little more creatively free and like interesting to me. And thank goodness I did, because that was where I met this person.
The cautionary tale.
And what's your name?
And then
I can't hardly believe though that you didn't choose to do the dinosaur one.
I know. I really think it was a twist. It was a twist of fate. I mean, it really was. Wow. I think like a twist of fate that like
does, on the surface that seems so much better
on paper.
I don't know.
That would have been a better one, but I think I was just like, it's going to be the same show every day. It's sort of less.
Gotcha.
You're improvising with the audience as opposed to like with another actor. Yeah. And I was like, that just seems cooler to me. Here's the thing.
You made the right choice.
I do too.
But you are not a person who feels comfortable interacting with strangers, right?
No, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But then when I came back to New York, I now had an equity card, and I was still getting typed into part. Like I just looked like an ingenue, and so they wanted me to have this soprano voice, and that's just not my voice. And those aren't even the parts I'm really that interested in generally, because I wanted to do more comedic stuff. And so I started doing more improv. And I was like, this is what I love. I love making people laugh, and that's what's fun to me. And then this just occurred to me just now. I remember, this is a story I've told many times, because people ask me, how'd you get into improv? Not that it was a dumb question. It was a great question. But this just occurred to me. I was talking about at the beginning of my long diatribe here that I had all these things. I was like, I want to be this. I want to be that. I want to be this. I want to be that. And one thing that I always say about improv, where I was like, I was frustrated with musical theater auditions. Like no one was wanting to see me. They wanted me to be a certain type. And I felt very hemmed in. And in improv, I can be anything. And a lot of times I'll say, I could be an archaeologist. I could be a cheetah. I could be a doctor. I could be like, I say all these things and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so funny that like that as a kid,
you wanted to be so many
I wanted to be all these different things. So full circle, did it work out?
First of all, I have to say, as a kid,
Yeah.
There were two things that I remember I wanted to be as I was kind of trying to go back in my memory. One of them was a school bus driver because I loved like the way the door opened. I loved like the, do you know the thing? It like had a certain.
Yeah.
You didn't have what it took.
It's like an air thing.
Yeah.
It's like it has like a.
Yeah.
Well,
like
but this was like before that. And so it was like completely like this crank thing. Like,
Oh.
And then the other one was like you,
So, but
Ashley.
that's wait. Before we move on from that,
That was
the
maybe
first thing you wanted to do was
that's
be
the
a
first thing I
school
remember.
bus driver because of this.
Yes, that is exactly right.
And
Because
what you
of that.
ended up doing is this.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, kind of, sort of, yeah, absolutely. But it was that. But then, Ashley, like you, I think I wanted to be a teacher. I played school with my brother, and it was a bit, and I played with puppets, but I never ever thought of that. I never thought that was like a job. I just didn't.
But you were a fan of the Muppet Show,
fan of the Muppet Show and Jim Henson and Sesame Street, but I just didn't even know that was a thing. And so, in junior high, got involved in acting, and I've talked about meeting that group of people, my tribe at that children's theater, and so that's kind of when I was like, oh, this is a thing that I want to do. That was what it was going to be. I was going to be an actor, and I did some shows, and after I graduated, I did some shows back in Kansas City while we made money to move to New York, and I was going to move to New York to be an actor, which is what happened.
Wait, so when you decided to move to New York, it wasn't to pursue being a Muppeteer; it was to be an actor.
Yeah, well, he went to the same conservatory as me. He was extremely successful at the conservatory. He was a regional theater major, so it was regional theater and musical theater majors. He was a regional theater major who was cast a lot, and
I was cast.
He was even in like musicals. Like, so it was like he was like crossing the thing. So he was like very prime,
but all the while
moving to New York to. Be an
all
actor.
the while you were doing puppet stuff.
No.
And it's just interesting.
Not really.
No? You talked about doing it at puppet show as a kid, and then Ashley said when she met you were doing puppet stuff.
Yes, but that was like I don't even know. Like, that was never something that I was like, this is the thing that I'm really supposed to be doing. I never.
But I find that interesting that you just naturally were gravitated towards being a puppeteer.
Yeah.
But never, and loved the Muppet Show and all these things, but never. And liked acting, but never put that together. That's wild.
I think but I really do think it's similar to the idea that, like, I didn't mention this in my very long thing, but like at some point, well past the time that would have been appropriate, it occurred to me, like, I had always been like, oh man, I loved SNL. Oh, it'd be so cool to be on SNL. It never occurred to me that was a thing that was achievable.
Right.
It did not occur. I never understood, oh, there's steps you could take to do this. I didn't know there were internships at like late night shows. I didn't know that I didn't understand any of that.
Yeah,
and some of that is like a lack of intellectual curiosity on my part, or laziness, or inability to sort of do something.
Or just but you had other things.
This thing that's like, it feels so like preordained for someone that is not me.
Yeah.
Or something that's like, well, obviously those people understand it. And so I think this is like a similar idea where it's like, you're not going to not do it because you like it, but you're also not thinking consciously, this is a path to that.
Those Muppet performers already had their job. Like, that was their job. And it was my job to watch them and enjoy them doing the thing that made me happy. But I never thought, like, I want to be that guy. I want to do that thing for a living. I just did not see that as a thing that I could possibly do. But I had been able to do some shows as I was growing up and been an actor. And that was something that was attainable or felt more attainable to me. Maybe that's some of it, is like being a Muppet performer was never something that would have, there were like 5 of them on the Muppet Show. And then maybe I didn't even know how many were on Sesame Street, but it's a small number. Even today. And, it just seems unattainable. And I didn't even realize that it was a thing. But moving to New York, I didn't think I would move to New York. I probably thought that I would stay in Kansas City. I guess. I mean, I never thought about where I might live when I grew up, other than I wanted to be an actor. And there was a big acting. There are a lot of actors in Kansas City, and they make a living at being an actor. And maybe I'll stay here, but.
So you wanted to be a bus driver, and then you met these people who did this like workshop thing, and when you were like a sophomore in high school, something like that?
Middle school.
I was
middle school.
Freshman in junior high at that time.
And that's when you got this sort of acting bug, and that's stuck with you since then.
Yes, and and that's how I met people that went to Webster, and that's why I went to Webster, because somebody else was an actor and they went to Webster, so I'll go there.
Yeah. So that helps with the imagination to know other people who had a path into acting in some kind of way. Were there any other things as a young person before you discovered acting, or even maybe mildly during that same time where it's like, oh, this is another thing I'm kind of talented at that maybe I could do?
Yeah, I mean, my friends and we made silly little films.
Okay.
And but they were still kind of acting adjacent. They were acting stuff, but there was like all improv things that we were doing, just silly videos. And
so it was still the acting part of that appealed to you, not the filmmaking part of it necessarily.
Not necessarily the film.
Not necessarily.
No, I think that grew over time. But back to like personal stuff, I think that like even like kids, I wanted kids, but after Kelly and I got married, we said we'd never have kids in the city, and then we had a kid in the city. And another, and then another, and then a fourth, and then like that. These things just kind of like happened, and we would say like, we're not going to have kids in the city. I guess we're having kids in the city, and
I mean, you do know how it happens, though, right?
No. Yes, I have an idea of how it happens.
But Kelly has never told you the full story yet.
No, God, no. No, I can't do that.
And yet she keeps duping you into it.
I know.
Did you ever want to be, and you are this or have been this, but not as your profession necessarily, but a musician? Because that is another part of your talents. That's something you spend a lot of time doing. Did you ever want to be like, oh, I want to be in a band that's like a famous band or something like that?
No. I mean, one of the videos that we did when we were growing up was like a video of this horrible band. Like they were intentionally horrible, and and none of us knew how to play instruments at all. And it wasn't until our friend Michael, who had a guitar and hung out with me when he moved up to New York. He lived with Kelly and me for like a couple of weeks, and he brought his guitar with him, and he was just, playing the guitar, and we'd sing, Hootie and the Blowfish songs or whatever he could play. And then we just started to make stuff up. And then it just kind of, again, became like something where we were like, well, this is fun spending time together doing this. Let's do more of this. And that's kind of how that happened. And I think some of it is just being open to the possibility of anything. Of whatever it might be. So I wrote these things down just because these are the things that I never thought I would move away from Kansas City and go to New York and be there for 15 years. I never thought I would be one of the Sesame Street Muppet performers. I never thought I'd be one of the Disney Muppet performers. I certainly never thought I would be Kermit the Frog or Big Bird, or be a director or a co-producer or a puppet captain on Sesame Street. I never thought Kelly and I would have kids in New York City, like I said. I never thought we'd have 4 kids in New York City, or let alone another kid once we moved outside New York City. I never thought I would have 5 kids. Kelly says she always knew she would have 5 kids, and I was like, I don't remember that part in our discussion. Never thought we'd have dogs. We always had cats. We have 2 dogs. And then I did write this thing down. Yeah.
So Kelly basically manipulated you into a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely.
She always wanted dogs.
Well, I
wait. Before did Kelly want dogs? Is that her thing?
No, that was
it's your kid's
That was
thing.
me. It was me. When I turned 50.
You changed.
Yeah, I was like, I need to have a dog. I want to have a dog. I feel like I've grown. What would it be like if I lived my whole life without a dog? And I love my dogs so much.
That's awesome.
I will say, after Lila was born, I remember we went out to dinner or something, all the 4 of us, and I remember being like, "Wow, now you have 3. I can't believe it's so crazy." You're like, "Yeah," and I was like, "So are you done? Or are you going to keep going?" You're like, "Oh yeah, we're done. And Kelly was like, "No, we're going to keep going." And I was like, "Wow!" And then I remember after Keaton was born. Almost the exact same
conversation.
Oh, no,
we're done.
And you were like, we're done. And Kelly was like, oh, I don't know. And you were like, no, we're done.
And here's a little secret. I was the one who said maybe we should try for a 5th. That was me.
You just thought there was nice symmetry to that number 5.
Yeah. Then one really important thing is I never thought that Kelly and I would be happier than we've ever been at this point in our lives, because we're just really loving our time together, and I'm very lucky. I'm lucky and grateful that I just never really consciously planned any of this. I don't think. I mean, not at least consciously. I didn't do it consciously.
I think I'm really emotional because I'm thinking about your 30th birthday. And Kelly made you a album, and it had all these pictures from when you were a kid with puppets, and like around your 30th birthday, you had gotten like, you'd sort of gone from being sort of a like at will, or like you had done like things here and there for Sesame Street, but you weren't like what you are now. But you had like risen up through the ranks of more than you had previously. And so I'm crying this much, but at your birthday, it was so much worse because I was like looking through this album, and it was like pictures of you as a kid with puppets, and then like pictures of you in college with puppets, and then like the ad from backstage for Coca-Cola Polar Bear, which was like I think the first thing you did with Henson. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a picture of Kermit the Frog, and it said, "Do you measure up to be a Muppet?" And they were looking for somebody my height, my weight, the left-handed, everything. And they were like,
"It was crazy."
Great. And that was Kelly that saw that ad. And had she not seen that ad, I don't know that I would be here now.
Nice.
And so, like, because I was 2 years behind Matt, by the time I moved to New York, he was doing some of these things. And so it was like a huge part of the beginning of my time in New York was getting to watch going over to Matt and Kelly's super early. Or no, we spent the night before Thanksgiving, I think. A bunch of us, like sleeping on the floor so that we could wake up in the morning. We'd walk down to H&H Bagels. Brought back bagels. You had gotten up at like a crazy o'clock.
I was gone.
And like for us to watch him on the Thanksgiving Day parade as Big Bird. And it was the first year that you did that.
Wow.
And like I went to the first year that you did Big Bird at the Lincoln Center tree lighting.
Yeah.
And that was a crazy one too, because I was like, I remember I saw I knew you were there. I was there standing with your wife, and I saw you on stage as Big Bird, and you waved at me and you said, "Hi, Ashley," and I was like, Big Bird knows my name, and then I was like, wait, that's Matt. But it was just crazy to like look through that album and see sort of like, yes, you didn't plan it, but like to sort of see like it's like that thing of looking back at this trail of breadcrumbs that you didn't even know that you had dropped. And like, oh my God, they like totally
I
like
think
took me.
that is what it is.
Anyway, that was quite a display, but
I like this topic, even though I don't feel I don't feel like I have great things to share on the topic as far as like achievements, or I had a vision, or I lucked into this great thing or whatever. But I do have a lot of things to relate to. And I do like, I remember being like a person in my 20s. I was always very concerned about my future as a kid. And I did have big dreams, but no real examples to follow. I remember like in my 20s, like thinking like, what if literally having this thought, what would my 10-year-old self think of me now? Like if my 10-year-old self, had you ever had that thought, either of you? So like if my 10-year-old self just had a quick like glimpse and didn't get the full context or whatever, but just saw me, my future self in this moment doing this thing right now, would that 10-year-old self be? And I'd always have the thought when I was doing something cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the time. Like I remember I did a show at the Sydney Opera House, and like we lived like down the way from it. And so we would walk there. We were like walking distance. And so I would walk down the street to the harbor, and then you'd turn right, and then you'd see the Opera House. And then I would like walk in and like swipe my thing. And I just remember I would always think like, this is insane, that this is what my life is. And if I was 16, I would never have even dreamed of going to Australia. I wouldn't have even, I mean, I always thought Australia was the coolest, but I was like, this would be wild to me that I'm like working in Australia at like this most iconic place, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely, I've done lots of cool things like that in my life, things I would have never dreamt I would have done. Like even things that don't seem that crazy, but as a kid, like that's not something someone like me does, like go to Hawaii. That's something they did on the Brady Bunch did on TV. That was like, oh, that's something that a normal person would never do. That's you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But I've been to Europe and Hawaii and Mexico and Canada, and like, so I've done all these sort of like traveling kind of things, and those are like amazing. Or like meeting like famous people. I've done a lot of like that kind of thing that if I don't remember playing that game in a while, that like, oh, if my 10-year-old self could see this. But I had plenty of those moments. But my first thing I remember wanting to be is a tortured artist. I literally idolized Vincent van Gogh and like learned all I could about Vincent van Gogh and spent my time drawing and loved Vincent van Gogh paintings. This is like when I was 10 and younger. So like that's weird, right?
As a 10-year-old?
Yeah. That's the first thing I can honestly remember wanting to do is to be a tortured artist.
And and were you
guys
good at
are like
drawing?
so
Did you
weirded
draw?
out by
Did
me.
you? No. I'm trying to figure out like, did you like how long was this fascination or desire to be a tortured artist last? It still continues to this day.
I mean, I don't think I didn't like get older and still want to be tortured, but I did like always have art as an interest of mine. And it was sort of like a talent that I discovered early that I was rewarded for, that I was like, oh, this is a way for people to like me or to think I'm good at something.
Like being a boxer.
I think I'm more narcissistic than Ashley, though, in that like the tortured artist thing is like, that's a narcissistic thing to like, because that would make me special in some kind of way. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a weird choice to make, but
it's just the tortured part, like the artist part.
That's pretty normal.
Well, what did I know about like I didn't know about any like just working artists,
but it was also like you were emulating someone who was sort of renowned for being a tortured, like
that's right,
tortured themselves, were like cut their own ear
I
off,
appreciated
like,
art,
yeah.
And so here's like the most famous artist that I had ever heard of was Vincent van Gogh, and I got some like attention for having some talent at art. So I guess that's what I could do is like, I guess that's something that would make me special is to like, because Vincent van Gogh is like famous for all time. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's to me, a very narcissistic thing. And children are narcissistic, so that's fine. But
don't we all want to kind of make a like some sort of, even whatever it is, like we want to make some sort of impression on the world to
right, like,
and especially when you're a kid fantasizing. I think
that's part of the biological imperative to have children. It's like part of like what makes
right
why we procreate is to like leave something behind.
I also started getting attention for having a loud voice and so I could be an actor of some kind. I remember when I was in 4th grade, we did like an African studies thing where we made our own little paper mache masks from like new African fairy tales, or not fairy tales, African folklores.
Papier-mâché, is that what you mean?
Papier-mâché.
Okay, thank you.
And then we would read an African folklore, and then the teacher made me play the lion because I had the best roar in class and I could have a big voice and do that. So that sort of started giving me the acting bug.
It was a tortured roar.
Yeah, tortured roar. I was the editor-in-chief for my high school paper, and I chose the University of Kansas because they have a great journalism department, and I was thinking like, that's what I'll be. I'll grow up and be a journalist, even though I don't think I ever wanted to do that. I think I just wanted to be like, I would have again, it's like when you're a kid, all these, like you want to be an archaeologist, you want to be Indiana Jones. You really don't want to be an archaeologist. Right. You want to have an adventure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't really want to be a journalist. I just wanted to like be a part of something important in some kind of way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really what I mostly wanted to do as a young person was just party. It was just like because I switched schools every 2 years, growing up until high school, I didn't grow up like with friends, and I also, because of divorced parents, I didn't live in the same place for very long, so I always had a hard time. Like I didn't have friends. Like I didn't. So and when I'd go to a new place, I was always very introverted and afraid. Like I didn't know how to like meet everyone, but I knew how to like show off when I was given permission to. So like the roar, it's the lion thing, you know what I mean? Or I could be like the best kid in the art class and stuff like this, and like get attention for being talented, but being afraid to be thought of as a show off in some kind of way. And also like not sure, like no one knows me or knows anything about me, and I don't know how to like introduce myself to people sort of way. So when I hit high school for the first time, I did have the same group of friends for more than a couple years, and then I started to become popular and like in a social group sort of thing. So I was really like, my soul needed that. My soul needed to feel like I belonged to a social group sort of thing. And so I put too much focus into being popular and going to parties and having girls like me and this sort of stuff at that age when that's a normal thing. Absolutely. But for me, it was very important because I had never felt a part of the social group before that.
It totally makes sense to me that my question was going to be when you were younger and you were moving like every 2 years, did you know that was going to happen? Like after a couple of times, did you know, I know that this is short lived.
No.
Or would you be making efforts at that, in that time to like connect with people, or was it like you did make friends, but then you moved, and so that was like it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. I would have friends, but that's like that friend was like, oh, that was my fourth grade friend that I knew for that year, and we bonded because we both loved Steve Martin albums and would go home after school and listen to Steve Martin albums. Or that was my friend who would come over and play Star Wars figures with me and whatever, and we both had fish tanks with fish in them, and so I found ways to bond with kids eventually without the way kids do, right? Yeah.
Well, when he went to high school, he was going to the high school that his parents taught at, so he knew, I'll be at this school. I'm not leaving this school. Okay.
I did know at that point, yeah.
At that time, he knew without any question he would be there and not move.
Yeah. So, what did I want to be? I don't know. I wanted to be a tortured artist. And I succeeded.
You did it.
You did it. All right.
You did it.
Yeah. You're the only one of us who got to be what they thought they would be when they were little.
It went exactly the way you thought.
That's exactly it. Okay. Let's cut it here. Let's be done for today. Let's come back next week for part 2 of Looking Glass, coming at you next time on Solve for Gen X. Credits.
Solve for Gen X is mixed and edited by Nate Starkey.
The theme song was written by Nate Starkey and Matt Vogel and performed by the Mighty Weaklings.
Our podcast art was created by Dave Hulteen at davehulteendesign.com.
You can find Solve for Gen X wherever you listen to podcasts.
And it's also available to watch on YouTube.
Just search Solve for Gen X.
If you're so inclined, please rate and review our show. It really helps our visibility.
Or whatever.
Whatever.
Solve for Gen X is a Welcome Matt and Married Nate and Ashley production.